So far in our application, we have built how to create, list and delete container. But now we want to work on managing what is inside a container. Like we want to upload a blob, we want to delete a blob, we want to see all of the blobs and so on. How do we do that? Just like we have container service, we will have to create one more service, which will be blob service that will be responsible for the individual blobs that we will have in a container. So if we go to Solution Explorer, let me copy the iContainer service and paste it one more time. I will rename this to iBlob service. We will copy that name and paste it for our interface name. Now what will be all of the methods for the blob service? Inside containers, we had the get all container and blobs. We will delete that, but we will have get all blobs just like we had inside the container. So this will be get all blobs, and we will return a list of all of the blob names inside a container. So for that, we will need a property here, which will be container name, because we want to retrieve only the blobs inside this container. Next, rather than create container, we will have create, or we can call this as upload blob. We will have download blob as well. Let me change that. Whenever we are uploading or deleting a blob, we will need few properties like what is the name this blob should have. So we'll have the string name, and when we upload, we want the file as well. So it will be an iForm file. I will call that as file. And finally, the container in which we have to upload this file or a blob object. When we are deleting a blob, we will need container name as well as name of the blob. So we will have those two properties, and here we can return a Boolean value. This looks good, but what if we want to retrieve a single blob? So I'll have to copy this, paste it one more time. When we have to retrieve a single blob, we need the name of the blob itself. And we'll call this as get blob, and this will be just one string. Perfect, this looks good. In the next video, let's implement the blob service. Let's implement our blob service that we created. So if we go back inside the services, let me add a new class file. I will call this blob service. This blob service will implement the iBlob service interface. So let's implement that. And just like we had inside our container service, the blob service client, let me copy that and we will paste that. To get that using dependency injection, we will rename the constructor name and add the using statement. The first method that we want to work on is to get all of the blobs. The methods that we were using inside container service were different because now we will be working on blob itself. If we examine the container service, we were using the getBlob container client that is used to allow access to data inside the container. So of course we will still need that, but we won't be needing method to create or delete a container. So let me just copy the blob container client and we will create that inside our blob service. So first we need a container client. Once we have that, then we can retrieve all of the blobs using our blob container client. In there, this time the method will be different, which is getBlobsAsync. That will retrieve all of the blobs. Once we have all of the blobs, we can iterate through loop and we can add that to a file object. So here we can say variable blob string is equal to new, and we can create a list of string, and we'll say await for each, and we'll say variable item in blobs. So for all of the blobs, we will iterate through them and we will add that in our blob string. So blob string dot add, and we will add the name of the blob, so item dot name. Once we have that, we can return that back. So we will return blob string. So with that, when this particular service is called, it will return a list of string with all of the blobs in the container name that is passed right here. So now our main focus will be to create a controller for Blob, and we will have to pass the container name there. Let's do that in the next video. We have added the code to get all of the blobs. Let's work on getting a single blob. Now when we want to get a single blob, if we go back, what we can do is we can just retrieve the URL. And once we have that, we can use that to download the blob. So let's go back and let's implement that right here. The first thing, like always, is we will need the blob container client. So let me copy and paste that here. Once we have the blob container client, then we will have to retrieve the actual blob inside that. For that, we will need the name of the blob, and we have that in the parameter. So we'll say variable blob client is equal to blob container client. On there we have method which is get blob client. You can see previously we were using the get blobs async, but this time we just want to get the blob client. When we want to retrieve the client for a blob, we need to pass name of that blob itself. So we will pass that, and finally what we want to return is inside the blob client we have the URI, and we want to get the absolute URI. We just need to make this method async and everything looks good. Let's scroll down. When we have to upload a blob, we will have to do some things little different, but we will again need the blob container client as well as we will have to get the blob client. So let me copy and paste that here. And once we get the blob client, we will actually have to create a blob HTTP header. In there we can define the content type, which will be the file type. So we'll say variable HTTP headers is equal to new blob HTTP headers. We will press Ctrl dot for the using statement. Inside there we have quite a few properties that we can define. The main one here is the content type, and that we can retrieve from the file that we receive in the parameter. So file.contentType will be the content type of the new blob that we will upload. Once we have the headers, we can create a variable with the name of result, and we can call blob client. In there we have the upload async method. The first parameter will be content, that will be inside file. We can use the open read stream to read and pass all the content. The next parameter will be the HTTP headers, and then optionally you can provide cancellation token, but we'll just keep things simple for now. Then we will add an if condition, and if the result is not null, that means the upload was successful, and we will return true, else we will return false. So great, we had to do some modifications to configure the header, and then we were able to upload that using the built-in method inside the blob client. The last thing that remains is to delete a blob. So let me copy the first two things to get the blob container client and the blob client and paste that inside the delete blob. Once we have the blob client, we can say return await blob client. In there we have a method delete if exist async. So here we are first getting the container, we are getting the blob inside that container based on that name, and if that blob exists, then we are deleting that blob. Pretty simple and straightforward. So you can see manipulating blobs is pretty simple because there are many helper methods that the .NET team has provided with the package for Azure Blob Storage. Now that our blob service is configured, let's actually consume that in a controller from the next video. We want to create a controller so we can consume our blob service. So if we go back inside the controllers, let's add a new controller. It will be an empty controller, and we will call this blob controller. We need to get the blob service using dependency injection. So let me add that, and we'll add the using statements as well. Now what will be the methods inside the blob controller? Let me close everything else, close all but this, and let me go to views here. Inside container, we have index. You can see on the manage button, it is redirecting us to an action with the name of manage inside the blob controller, and we are passing the name of container as ASP route. So inside the blob controller, we will change this name to manage, that is the index name, and we will get container name right here in the parameter. We can explicitly say this will be HTTP GET action method. We'll make it async and task of I action result. We need to retrieve all the blobs here. So variable, we can say blobs obj is equal to await underscore blob service dot. We have get all blobs. We just need to pass the container name that we received. That will retrieve all of the blobs object, and we will pass them to the view. Once we have this in place, let me just go to the layout page inside shared underscore layout. I will copy the navigation and create a navigation for container so that it's easy to navigate rather than changing it every time in the URL. So controller will be container and action will be index. Let's run this and see what happens. Perfect, we have container. We can see both the container here. If we click on manage, it goes to manage and it has the container name. But this time we get an error unable to resolve service type for iBlob service. Of course, we did not add that or configure that in the program class file. So let's add a singleton implementation for the iBlob service. Let's run our project one more time. Let's go to containers and click manage. We have an error here which says the manage view was not found. But if we go to blob controller, let's add a debugger here and refresh this. We will see we have two blobs and we can see image1 tequila. Next, inside the XPS virtual directory, we had image2 underscore XPS. So great, our blobs are retrieved successfully. Now in the next video, let's work on the manage view and continue from there. The next thing that we have to do is we need to create a view for manage. So we can right click here, add view, razor view, looks good, let me add that. We again will have to display all of the blobs in a table. So I have provided that inside snippets as well. Section 2 blob, we have blob manage. Let's open this, copy this, and paste it right here. The first thing that you can see here is we are displaying container name from the query string with the parameter of container name. Next, we have a button here or a link to add a new blob, which will take us to a new action method add file inside the same blob controller. We will add this in just a while. Then for each of the blobs that we have, we are iterating in a for each loop, and we have two action methods. The first action method is to view the actual blob, and it is opening in a new link because we have target underscore blank, and the action name is view file. We have not created that, but we will create that shortly. Similarly, we have a button to delete any of the blob that will take you to an action of delete file. In both of the action method, we are passing the name of the blob inside ASP route name parameter. So this is pretty straightforward for view. Let's run our application and see how this looks. If we go to container, inside images, perfect. We can see both of the image right here. This is the view tab, so if you click here, it will take you to view file, but that does not exist. So we'll fix that shortly. But right now, this looks good to list all of the blobs inside the container. In the next video, let's work on adding a blob.